Hey, I'm Mike Myers, and this is the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, which is geared to support songwriters and producers to gain confidence and turn pro. I bring on industry experts to help you improve and monetize your skills, engage better in the writing process, and build healthy habits to create a sustainable career that you love. Caffeinated, inspirational, conversational. Can we just agree music is a bunch of highs and a bunch of lows, not just sonically, but also experiences? It can be all over the map. And I think this week's guest, Lij Shaw, is a perfect example of this. Now, I love his podcast, Recording Studio Rockstars. My friend Jed got me onto it years ago. Now, not only does this dude have a Grammy, but he's been at the forefront of fighting for Nashville studios, especially for people that operate out of their home, to keep their studios and keep their business running, because the city was like, hey, I think we need to stop that. But no, he took to it and he was like, no, we're going to fight this. So we're going to get into all this. So we're going to do a deep dive right now. Episode number 68, Journey to Music, Highs and Lows. Lij, I found out about you years ago from my friend Jed. He was like, dude, you should check out this, this podcast called Recording Studio Rockstars. And I was like, oh, okay. And I love, because it was just a deep dive into the process. Because this was like, I don't know, maybe like 2017, 2008. It was somewhere around there, or 18. I was diving through. And I think it was the first episode I heard was like, I remember I was a huge fan of Cartel, the band. You talked to Will and his studio stuff, and you were going through the whole process. And I was just like, that was so cool. And then I just started listening every week. And then I started kind of like, I wonder what he does. And your studio in East Nashville, it's been there. And just your entire journey, I was like, you seem like just a cool dude that has like amazing stories. Thanks, so now I have a podcast and I'm like, let's bring you on. And now that I'm a Nashville resident, I'm like, let's talk shop. And I'd love to know, especially your journey, because I think when people get into recording, the journey to get there isn't like a straight and narrow journey. It's like a very windy, like they're here for a little bit, they do this, and then suddenly they get into recording. But was there always a fascination with you with the concept of recording?
Oh, well, let's see. I mean, for me, like anybody, it was sort of some music lessons as a kid and stuff like that. My parents put me in Suzuki when I was 4 years old, and I was going, wait. What was the song we used to have to learn? Mississippi Hot Dog. And it's just like, cut a hole through your eardrum. But I do remember the first time I got interested in recording was probably as technically like when my cousin and my brother and I were driving across country, and my parents would throw us in the back of a pickup truck on top of an old mattress that was back there. And we drive all the way across, no seatbelts, nothing. For
totally safe. Yeah, it's absolutely fine.
2 days. And then we had one of those classic, 1970s Panasonic cassette recorders. It was you'd lay it flat down on the table, and it had a handle, you could carry it on it, and you could record on it. So that was the first time I ever actually recorded anything. And we would sit around in the back of the pickup truck and like make up songs while we're driving across the country. We just press record, and then we'd like make up a song lyric. And of course they were all songs like, I'm waiting for you on track 9, stuff like that. But that's probably technically it. But then of course, like when I went to high school, we were really lucky. I was going to high school in Massachusetts, and our music teacher had come from Berkeley and then started teaching at this school that I was at. And he took, there was a classroom for school, and then there was a theater off from that. And then off of the classroom was really a utility closet. And he had them install a glass window in there for a control room window. And he converted that closet into a little 4-track recording studio.
That's amazing.
And that was in the 80s. So I got to take a class in there, and he actually had us do stuff like learn how to record onto 1/4-inch reel-to-reel tape. And we did something that was called Music Concrete, where you would decide that you were going to record maybe 3 or 4 different sounds. And, I recorded like running water and the sound of a ping pong ball dropping on a table. And I don't remember what the other ones were, a bell or something like that. And then we had to plot out, we'd figure out what the speed of the tape was and how that would measure out in like little increments of time. And then we would plot it out on a graph, and we'd compose a piece of music that was rhythmic, and we cut out 1 inch of tape. If it was like, whatever, if it was I'm gonna screw up the math. If it was 30 inches per second, then I guess we would, record the tape into 30 bits. And then that'd be like, how many beats per minute that is, whatever. I wasn't in math class. I was in fun class.
Now, somebody throws something from GarageBand, they sample it out and they just drag it out and then they adjust it. But like that, even just the concept of making you be like, hey, here's some inanimate objects, go create something musical out of that, and not think like, oh, I can only make rhythm stuff with a drum or with a tambourine, but the idea of like these really out of the box things, which really apply, especially long term when you record, like you have to do a lot of out of the box thinking about like when you're producing stuff. It's not always going to be these 4 instruments. It's going to be everything outside of that too.
Yeah. I mean, technically we were making beats.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what we were doing. Yeah. We were cutting these up into rhythmic patterns and then re-splicing the tape together. Yeah. And then you'd play it and you were like, your mind was blown. You'd hear like water going to ping pong balls, going to other things and back again. And it would create these rhythms. And that was sort of my introduction to it. And then we learned how to, operate the 4-track recorder. And, I think we learned some really basic music theory. So it was sort of, I remember thinking like, oh, wow, I didn't know there was like a logic to how songs went together. And I was like, cool, I'm going to take that class,
That's amazing too, that early on that you had something like that. I think of like in high school, they barely had it. I remember it was like, oh, you can't use this. I think it was the early days of some form of Logic or GarageBand. And it was just like, oh, you can't take it because you have to take algebra or like this. And I'm like, oh,
you're like, I can't use Logic because I don't know algebra.
Yeah. It's just like, this doesn't make sense. And it's just like, but that is such a cool opportunity, especially early on, to get exposure that way. And also kind of ignite this thing of like, oh, this intrigues me.
Yeah. And I think that was my junior year.
Yeah.
Because I was at a different school for the first 2 years, and they politely asked me not to come back to that school after 2 years. So then I ended up at a really cool school. Oh, the first one was like a military academy, like the crazy oppressive place in Connecticut. But it was fun, and then that kind of sparked an interest for me in music. And by the time I was a senior, my uncle taught me. He was a guitar player, so he was kind of like the singing cowboy, and that's what he knew how to do. And he'd sing songs on the porch at our family summer reunions.
Yeah.
And I always heard him sing it. And then I picked up a guitar and he showed me, I guess he saw that I was curious, and he was like, Lij, let me show you the first 3 chords. These are the 3 chords you need to know. And I'm trying to get the camera there. There you go. 3 chords you need to know. And then you'll be able to play a song. So I was like, oh, cool. Awesome. So he showed me E, A, and B7.
There we go.
And I was like, all right, the 1, 4, 5. Of course, I didn't know that back then.
You seem to have also had people around you showing you just like the nitty gritty of the thing too. It's just like the teacher that was like, cool, let's just dive in. Let's start recording. It's, yes, explaining it, but also showing you, okay, now start the application, I think.
Yeah.
Is really cool that people were just like, cool, now start using it.
Yeah.
Start applying it. And just that deep dive is so good.
No, it was great. And so, then I remember coming home from that summer trip, and my parents were split at that point in my life, and I had 2 different houses. And so I was on the trip with my mom, and I came back, and it was time for my birthday and later in the fall. And my dad must have asked my mom, was like, what's Elijah into these days? And because Lij is short for Elijah. And so she must have told him I was playing some guitar. So for my birthday, he took me down to the local music store, and I got a beat up old nylon Silvertone nylon string guitar that it looked like somebody had punched in the front of it and then they had glued it back together. It was like $80 or something, but it was awesome, So I got that, and I started just banging out chords, and like, once I had a few chords, that's all I wanted to do is just beat the crap out of my guitar and just play rhythm, play chords all night long. And I remember my stepdad telling me, at 1 a.m, it's like, it's getting kind of late. We got to go to bed on a school night. I was like, sorry.
It was the same for me. I think, especially to me, because that's the timeline. I think it was around junior or senior year. I was really starting to get interested in guitar. Like I think it sat there. They got it one year and it just but there was something that was like, okay, I want to start playing songs, because naturally the next progression is, and I'm curious for you if this is the same. Okay, if I'm playing songs, I have to be in a band.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I didn't even know about bands, to be honest.
Okay.
I just thought it was cool. I mean, I was into music and I was discovering Jimi Hendrix, sort of I think sophomore year, I had a friend at the first school I was at, and he had this great record collection. So he introduced me to like the Eagles and David Bowie and some of these really classic albums. Then classic rock was big at the end of my college years. We had radio stations in Boston that were called classic rock, and so all of a sudden I'm listening to Jimi Hendrix and just all the classic rock stuff, Eric Clapton and things. And also a big discovery for me was my brother and I would go down to we had Lechmere. That was the place up in Boston. That was like the department store that also had a whole stereo section. And we go straight to the stereo section. We look at all these stereos, and jam boxes were big at the time. And, of course, this is the 80s. So rap music was really sort of, and hip hop was making it had been around, but it was making its appearance, with private school kids up in Massachusetts, for example, like myself and my brother. So we wanted to go, check out the jam boxes and stuff. And we'd go around and we would see which ones looked really cool. And the ultimate test for which one was really like super special was you'd go up, we called it the eject test, and you'd go up to the cassette thing and you'd press the eject button. And if it went like this, here, let's see if I can get my hand on it. If it went clunk like that, then you're like, oh, that's a cheap one, man. That must be can I swear on this show? I don't know if I
you can swear. You can fucking say whatever you want.
That must be a piece of shit.
Well, it's true, because like the ones that go slow.
Exactly.
I remember when I had one. It's like, it's very elegant. It's almost like it's just it's just like, ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we found one and we pressed it and it was like, and we were like, oh my God, that's so fancy. That one has got to be so awesome. That really sounds great. We didn't even listen to it. But the one that we found had a cassette in it that I guess they had in the store for demoing the music and stuff, or demoing the jam boxes. And I pressed play on it and out came this music that was like crazy sounding. I was like, what in the world is that? And it was Don't Eat the Yellow Snow by Frank Zappa. It was apostrophe. Somebody had put apostrophe on this cassette, and that was the demo in the store. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And then as we were leaving, I was just like, I was a bit of I told you I got kicked out of a school before this, right? So I looked left and I looked right. And I was like, I'm just gonna borrow this cassette. And take
That's it. You just borrowed it because it was just, it's okay.
Yeah. So anyway, that was sort of my introduction to Frank Zappa and how I discovered him. And I just became a super fan of that. But one of the really silly things about that is that there was, on the flip side of the cassette, there was also a song called Werewolves of London by Warren Zevon. And I had no idea it was by Warren Zevon. I thought it was an extra track on Apostrophe by Frank Zappa. So for the longest time, I thought Frank Zappa had done Werewolves of London, and it was on Apostrophe until like years later.
That's interesting too, because then you're diving into again, there was something about that particular, the sound, the arrangement that's just like grabbed your ear. That's like, what is this?
And it's just great. That's what it is.
Yeah. And it's just pulling you in even more. So at this point, did you, after high school, was it like, I'm going to go towards music, or did that veer off to like, okay, I'm going to go to school and then figure out what I want to do?
Yeah. So I still was not very serious about music. I was having fun doing it.
Yeah.
But it was, I'm already a senior. It's already time to look for colleges. I think my dad was probably like, I'm not so sure Elijah really knows what he wants to do with life at this point yet. And so, or, maybe he thought he seems to be a little bit of a wayward, journeyer. And so he had me go in and take a test, this official Johnson O'Connor research test, which actually sounds like a lyric out of a Frank Zappa song. And so I went and I took the test, and they were like, you did good in musical stuff. You did good in, like technical kind of things. They said you'd probably be good at music engineering or and art. And I thought at that time I was like, well, I do like the engineering and the science stuff. I'm not really very good at music, so that can't be a thing. I hadn't mastered any instrument or anything by that point. And art was cool, but my mom was a fine artist, and I didn't see that as my direction. So they recommended architecture, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go. I'll pick architecture. What the hell? So I ended up going to college for architecture school in St. Louis. Oh. And that was great. It was a great, fun introduction. But I went into school there, and now they have more of a music program than that they did back then. Back then they had a music program, but it was really just classical. And now there's there's jazz, there's synthesizers, there's sort of pop production, things like that.
Yeah.
So while I was in school studying architecture or being told to turn in my homework for architecture and maybe not really doing it, I was having a lot of fun playing in bands. And maybe halfway through college, I realized that I wasn't so sure I wanted to do, I might be more interested in music. But at that point I went over and looked, and I was like, I don't see myself, being Andres Segovia and playing a classical guitar. Although I kind of wish I had tried it. And so I stuck it out with architecture.
Yeah.
And so really I did my first, 4 years of college. I mean, I was 23 and finished college and had really had fun playing in bands, but had no idea that was even an option for me at that point. I didn't really know music was an option. All this stuff that we do and take,
Well, it's funny because it depends. Sometimes people think it's just oh, that's a cool thing, but they don't know that it's a very viable option sometimes.
Yeah.
And so they go to school. It's funny. You went to school. I went for 1 year for college because my parents were like, college. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. I have no idea what the hell I want. This seems very irresponsible. I'm saying my name's to loans. I don't know if I can pay these. And so fine. And it was, but at the same time, you're saying, and that's when I started to play in bands. And I was like, I kind of like this thing. But especially I know when I taught guitar, the first couple of years, I had one student that she was in architecture. And I remember when she graduated, she then went on to take all these next steps and these next steps and these next steps to get certified because she works for this company. And it's there's even when you graduate, there's still so much more that needs to happen.
Big time. That's one of those professions where they say you study and you learn, and then you work and work and work and work. And by the time you might get to make your first building is when you're 50. And which is funny because now that I think about it, it's like the flip side of music. When you're in music, it's you better be hustling by the time you're about 16 or 17. At least, it seems that way sometimes because, people have these superstar careers in their 20s. Yeah. And then by the time you're 50, you're in VH1 Behind the Music, and that's a whole different story. But so in architecture, one of the things I like to point out is in architecture, they talked about how architecture was considered to be frozen music. And when I finished architecture and I had loved playing in bands, I had a chance with a buddy who was like, hey man, let's go travel, Europe and stuff after school for our next thing. And I was like, that sounds good. So I threw on a backpack, traveled around Europe on a train for a couple of months, worked in London for a couple of months. And then my brother he was actually doing his junior year of college. He had decided he was going to go to the farthest away, study abroad, and he was going to go to the farthest place he could think of. So he went all the way to Hong Kong University for his junior year. Oh, wow. And at this point, he had sort of caught the bug with me for music, but he had taken it serious and said, I'm going to go study piano in college. Mm-hmm. And so he called me when I was in London, and he was like, hey dude, I got a wacky idea. I joined this. I got a job at the jazz club in Lang Kwai Fong in downtown Hong Kong, and then I met this guy who's got a blues band, and now I'm playing drums in the blues band, and it's called Blue Whale, and and we need a guitar player. So you want to hop on a plane and come to Hong Kong and play guitar in this band with me? So I was like, I thought about it for a second. I was like, okay, let me think about it, but I think that sounds pretty good. And so within a week, I quit my job. I quit my 2 jobs in London. I canceled my lease on my apartment, and I said goodbye to my girlfriend. Sorry, Andy. And I hopped on a plane with no money. I just put it on an American Express card and flew across the world to London. I mean, excuse me, to Hong Kong. And I had no idea what I was going to do other than I was going to play in this band with my brother. And then I played for a half a year there and just played in a blues band. And that was like the first time I got a chance to really get schooled in music. I really played constantly. We were having like 5 gigs a week. And I can tell you one thing is for certain. I really sucked at blues guitar at that point in my life. That was like, I really needed the schooling, you know, but I learned a ton, and it was so inspiring and educational, and just like, it's the woodshed experience.
It is the sort of the best experience is you doing the thing. And for every screw up and everything, that's just a mental note you make of like, cool, well, that's a little thing that I've learned. And that's what's interesting. I think that's what keeps they either keep on going, or that's where they stop. Like if they screw up, they go like, oh no, like I messed this up. I should stop now. I guess I'm not meant to do it. But then there are others that go like, oh, I fucked up. Okay, cool. Well, let's just keep on going.
You know, and I might have been, I mean, not I might have been, I was lucky. So I know that there are a lot of people out there who might have had that kind of experience. But, and in fact, I have friends who went through that, who had so much either internal or like family pressure to go get a money-making job that they just couldn't stay that kind of music band course.
Yeah.
Because they would have had to go get a real job somewhere. Mm-hmm. I had the option to come. I guess I just didn't care. I mean, I was just like, whatever, this is fun. I never really sort of cared what anybody thought about it. And when we were in Hong Kong, we did a songwriting contest, and the singer wrote this song that it was like the Kuwait in war at that point, 91. And so William wrote this song, and he was like, and it was like gah, 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 gah on guitar, and he was like, no more war, no more war. No, he was British. No more war. And so anyway, our song won this contest, and so we got to go into a studio in Hong Kong to go record like a pro version of it. And that was my first time where I was really in a studio. I'd been in a studio before, but this is the first time I was really like paying attention. I was like, okay, this is really cool. There's like, I dig all these lights, and I see the tape machine and the console in front of me and all this stuff. And actually, in fact, I think when I had been in a studio before in St. Louis, I was in an ISO booth. And so I think that's really, now that I'm saying it out loud, I think that's the difference. This was the first time I was in a control room, and I was like, oh, look at all this stuff. This is cool. Look at that mixing console, And so I mentally decided while I was sitting there, I was like, when I go back to the US, I want to go find a school to learn how to do this. And I'm just going back to school again.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
I know. It's kind of nutty.
But it's just like you entertained a thing, you try, but then like you go out to Hong Kong, you're doing the thing, you're in that moment where you're just like, and it seems like no matter at what point from all those situations, music just was subtly there, regardless if it was a thing. It just didn't go away. It's just like at that point, the voice was loud enough that you were like, no, this is the thing. I have to do this thing.
Yeah. I think it helped that I had recorded with my bands back in St. Louis before going on this, world trip. And so I had a chance to go in, and like I had a band at the time in college. We're still playing music together today. Actually, I'm still playing music with these guys 30 years later, although we don't have the exact same band. It's just like same people doing different stuff. Yeah. But we had a band in college that was called Enormous Richard, which is one of those college names you give bands, and it was super fun. And I got to play banjo and fiddle in that band, and later on some electric guitar and stuff. But we had gone in to go take a ton of songs. It was a very prolific band, so we had like 30 songs at the time. And we went in and we set up a live to 2-track. We didn't actually set up. It was a buddy of mine who's now been on my podcast and is also my label now. But Megan set up, he was a live guy. And so he just brought all this stuff, set it up in a basement of a house where we could set up with the band. And so he had this mixer going, and then he just had it all running down to a cassette. And so we recorded our record. It was just live performances. Like we didn't even know. Yeah. We weren't even going to do overdubs or anything. So we just did live performances down to cassette, and did a 30-song record called Enormous Richard's Almanac 30 Country Hits. And so when I was in Hong Kong, I think maybe they sent me the printed copy of the tape while I was in Hong Kong. That's sort of what reignited it for me too. So I was sitting on a rooftop of this, 30-story apartment building we lived in, and just listening in headphones and a Walkman, Sony Walkman back in the day with the cassette, and just listening to our music. And so that, like, the reason I'm telling that story is it just gave me that experience of like recording yourself with the band, having that whole band in the studio experience, and then seeing it come out and listening to it. And that just ignites this passion for recording. I mean, I think if recording was just a technical thing we did, it'd be like, it might be a bit of a snooze fest, Yeah.
I think it's just interesting, everything based on that experience. And then that causes you to go like, okay, when I go home, I'm headed back. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to take this recording seriously. Where did you end up going? Is that how you found to Nashville, or slowly came to Tennessee?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. 26 minutes into this interview. So I ended up going to first I went to Berkeley, and I did an interview, and I was like, hey, I'm interested in this recording stuff. And they said, great, you need to sign up and pay the tuition and do the classes. And I was like, cool, how much is the tuition? And then they told me, and I was like, gulp. Well, I'm not going to be able to do that. So do I have any other options? And they said, yeah, there's a magazine that comes out regularly called Mix Magazine. And once a year they do a colleges special, and it just came out. So go pick it up on the newsstand. So I left Berkeley, walked across the street to a newsstand, got Mix, and opened up the back, and they had like 100 or 50 or whatever it was. It was a ton of music recording schools all across the country. Surprisingly, you think of there being a lot now. But back then there were still quite a few if you look for it. So MTSU was in that list down here in Nashville, and they had just built a new recording facility. It was like a $20 million building with a SSL console and Studio A. It was really nice. They had a MIDI lab. They had like they even had, a video animation lab where you could learn to do like really rudimentary video animations on the computer. They were a lot harder back then than they are today. And
that's crazy. MTSU, I didn't know it. Murfreesboro, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so, but the clincher was, it is a state university. And so if you were out of state, it was one tuition, but if you were in state, it was different. So I was like, well, why don't I just move down to Nashville and hang for a little bit? And then I'll sign up for school for next year. Cause it was like, perfect. So I did that, and I became an in-state resident, and then tuition was $700 a semester for like full 21 course hour load. So like, what is $70,000 now was probably like $700 at that point. I take that back. MTSU is not $70,000 now, but some colleges
that's still that's a pretty good deal for that, especially for the facility that was built. And so did you just dive in headfirst to just like the whole process?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing was, when I went to school for that, it was the first time in my life that I was going to school because I wanted to, and because it was something I wanted to do. Yeah. So it was like a completely different experience for me. I was so passionate about recording and music and soaking it all up. Like, I was so excited to learn this stuff, all I wanted to do was hang out with my friends and talk about music and recording and join bands and play. And so I ended up being part of this community down there for, 2.5 years that turned into a kind of a bit of a who's who of music in a way, because members of my class now own studios here in Berry Hill, multiple studios. They're Grammy winners. It's just like there are so many people that I knew back then that went on to become superstars in music and just really do incredible things. At one point, I was in a house with roommates where, upstairs was Matt Mahaffey, who had the band Self, still does, and went on to go produce soundtrack music for Shrek and all these Nickelodeon Cartoon Networks. And then Chris James, who was also in the band Self, who's now, he became Prince's engineer and is mixing Atmos mixes for Fleetwood Mac and stuff like that. Just incredible list of stuff. And then my classmates were like F. Reed Shippen, who's, over the.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So all these people you see on the internet who are teaching music today, So that was just a lot of fun,
Hey, it's Mike, and I just wanted to jump in the middle of this podcast to remind you that we record these live every Tuesday on our YouTube channel at 1 p.m. Central. So you can actually be part of the experience as we're recording this. You get to ask questions as we wrap things up, so you can be part of the whole experience. We've got tons of amazing guests coming up, so just go to youtube.com/songwriting for guitar to see all the lists of guests that we have coming up, and so you can get those reminders and you can be part of that live taping every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Central. All right, enough of the jib jab. Back to the episode. You mentioned they went on to go win Grammy. You won a Grammy. It's just like if we're going to drop you through that, there's a whole lot that happens between then. But, what made you go from, you went to school and then setting up your first studio, taking on some of your first clients, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, when I was in school, I remember buying my first piece of gear. I was like, I'm ready to get something for recording, So I was like, what do I want? I was like, well, I got to be able to listen to stuff when I recorded at school and bring it home to my stereo. So my very first purchase was, now in all fairness, I already had a 4-track and I already had a microphone from years ago, just for band stuff. But my first pro piece of gear was a Tascam DA30 DAT machine, which does not work anymore. But it was fun to just bring these little tapes back from school and play them on the stereo at home. And then I think the next thing I got was actually an oscilloscope, because I'd started taking electrical engineering as a minor in college. And so I figured I learned how to put the Lisa Zhu pattern on, you know what that is, where it's you put the X and the Y coordinates onto the oscilloscope and then you can hook it up to the stereo. So you get all these incredible, beautiful circles and stuff while you're listening to classical music. It's awesome.
That's cool.
Totally awesome. But let me keep going forward. I'll try not to do the slow train.
You got it.
So I started getting that. I finished school. When I was done with school, I thought, I still, in my mind, I had no interest in country music. I had no interest really in Nashville yet. And in my mind, all the cool shit was still happening where my buddies were playing music up in St. Louis. So because I came from that indie rock background. And so I was like, okay, when I'm done school, I'm going to probably go to St. Louis and go start a studio up there, start a home studio. And then a buddy of mine had gotten an intern. Chuck Pfaff was my roommate, and he was up here at County Q Studios, and he was like, dude, this is great up here. You got to come up and check it out. Why don't you just come up and be my roommate in my apartment and, try out Nashville first. So I was like, all right, I'll do it. So I came up and lived here, and then ended up finding a studio called Alex the Great over in Berry Hill with Brad Jones and Robin Eaton. And that was the first time I saw a pro studio where these guys were really making cool music. And I really liked all the people and I liked the music, and it wasn't country. And I was like, all right. I can do this Nashville thing. I see Nashville's cool. I just didn't know it yet. And so I did that for a while. And then at a point, I guess right about the time, it was right about close to 2000, and I'd been working for a bit, and I was getting close to 30 myself, 30 years old. And I was like, all right, it's time to get serious. I think I need to, my brother bought a house, and I was like, and he's 2 years younger. So I'm like, well, if he bought a house,
Man,
I gotta buy a house.
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to do that. Somehow miraculously, I was able to buy a house as like a poor ass musician, engineer person. But I had enough for the down payment, and they still give you loans back then. And simultaneously, somebody said to me that idea of the 5-year plan. And I was like, all right, what's my 5-year plan? And I was like, well, 5 years from now, I want to have like a nice home studio, a good one, and be able to. I had this idea that I was just going to get up in the morning, grab my coffee and my boxers, and go straight to the control room. I don't know why that was a good idea, but
it's an amazing journey to go from that to there. It's like, when people are like, oh, the commute. And I'm like, the commute was rough. There was stuff in the hallway, but I was able to get here. It's, I don't know, it's a dream. It's awesome.
Yeah. And well, now I do have a little bit of a commute. It's longer than the kitchen to the control room. I actually have to go down my driveway across the yard. And when my commute is rough, that's because I have a cypress tree outside that creates these pine coney things. And then when the fall happens, they explode into sharp little shrapnel, and they land all over the walkway in the driveway. And I'm barefoot all the time because I got into barefoot running, and like a decade ago.
Okay.
And so when it's rough, it's because I'm having to walk across those guys down to the studio.
Oh shit. But so I love that idea of the 5-year plan, because it is, it's good to think short term, but just like, what do you want to see happen? And how do we have to make it happen? What are like the tangible steps to get there?
Yeah.
And I think that's great, especially for anyone that's like, I don't know if I can do this. It's like, no, where do you want to be? And let's backtrack. Cause it's that journey of backtracking. And so you've set up this studio, and, you've made a name for yourself, and you've recorded lots of different things, and then you won a Grammy. And then what I'm super curious about, because this to me is I'm like, talk about highs and lows. 1 minute you get a Grammy, and it's like probably cloud 9.
It was pretty awesome. I bought an espresso machine for the studio to celebrate.
That's how you should celebrate. You should celebrate with anything fucking caffeinated. That's amazing.
The one where you press the button and it just automatically grinds the beans and makes it and spits it into a little cup for you. That's good.
I got to ask you, what's your favorite do you have any bean favorite places in Nashville? Like there's some, like I like Slow Hand and I like Honest. Those are good.
Those both sound good. I don't know this one so well. Bongo East is where I've been getting beans from, and they have one that is a whiskey barrel roast.
Ooh, okay,
that's really good.
That sounds good. So you're celebrating. So it's like you get a Grammy, you buy an espresso machine, and then out of nowhere, a cease and desist letter to stop from Nashville.
Yeah. So at this point, we've zoomed ahead to 2000, and so my studio I opened in 2000. Started it in 2005. 2007 is really when I opened the doors and it was ready. Yeah. Worked for a decade. 2015 is when the Grammy came in, and then a month later, I got this cease and desist letter in my mailbox that said, you need to cease and desist operating a commercial recording studio at your home address. You've got 30 days to comply, and blah, 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 blah. And then they doubled down on that. When I talked to them, they were like, I was like, I'm a home studio, I'm trying to, what do I need to do? And they're like, I can see that you're making YouTube videos with local bands. You need to stop doing that. I was like, okay, I stopped, And then they're like, I could see you made one just last night at 2:00 in the morning. I don't believe you. And I was like, ma'am, we recorded that like months ago, and it was scheduled to release last night at 2 in the morning. Yeah. I don't think she understood YouTube.
What was their reasoning behind that too? Like, because that seems like so out of all this time, suddenly out of nowhere, it seems so ridiculously dumb.
Exactly. It is. Well said, Mike. So the thing is, when I was going to school, when I was interning, when I was working for the first decade,
Yeah.
I saw that people had home studios all across Nashville. It's Music City. This is what people did. Jack White won a Grammy with Loretta Lynn, right? From
Yeah.
a home studio right in East Nashville. I mean, it was like, there's like multiple Grammy winners done in home studios. So it was very clear that that was a thing to do. And I had absolutely no idea that Nashville, maybe they had some version of this before 98, but in 98, they added a law to the books that said you could work from home if you got a special permit, but you couldn't have a customer come to your house. So that meant that all the home studios that were operating, as well as any other home business out there, if you were like teaching piano lessons to people and they came over for a piano lesson, Nashville was calling that illegal. And so I got caught in the crossfire because somebody apparently was some dude who's like, like, hey, this is Wayne. I was trying to, he actually called in. The reason I heard him and found out about it was because later on we were on television talking about this, and it was a Q&A thing. And this guy calls in and he's like, I'm the one who filed the complaint. So what happened was he was trying to start a computer repair business, and he got like his LLC and his business license. And then he called city codes to say, come do an inspection. And I'm ready to start my, my computer repair. And they said, well, you can't do this in your home. And he was like, what do you mean? He's like, I thought there were other people working from home. So apparently he thought it was a wise idea. Thanks, Wayne, to file a complaint against codes. And he's just like, he found my studio on the internet and just like threw me into the complaint letter. And he just doesn't even live right here. He's not even a neighbor.
That's what that is so bizarre. The number one to be like, well, let me find someone. This guy right here. Let me just throw this into me. And then suddenly you get in the crossfires of all of this. But what I find again is you had an option, and your option was, oh, hell no. Like, I am not going to sit here and just be like, all right, I guess you guys, I'll let this go and I'll find some other means. Because like at this point, if we're talking a decade where you have a Grammy, so you've built a name for yourself, it is your primary source of income. It's what you support. It's what you create. Yeah, you got to fight and stand up and, be like,
well, plus I'm a single dad, I was supporting my family. I've got a daughter who stays with me half the time. And, I gotta put food on the table, and I've got to keep a roof over our heads. And this is, like you said, I had moved to Nashville, gosh, at this point it was 25 years prior to dedicate my life and career to doing this. And then all of a sudden Nashville's like, yeah, thanks very much. We appreciate all the taxes, but
we're Music City, but don't have music here. I prefer it not to.
We're Music City as long as you're a hotel downtown.
Good Lord.
Actually, I'm not going to throw hotels under the bus. Okay. So I just looked at that, and of course, I mean, I'm not going to lie, it scared the shit out of me at the time. I couldn't sleep for a week. I was like super stressed out. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I built a better privacy fence because I felt like people were like prying eyes were, coming. I didn't know who, called codes and did this thing to me and all that. So it was very, very stressful. It was really fearful. And then I ended up deciding to talk to the Tennessean, which is the big newspaper here. Mm-hmm. And I did an anonymous interview, which made the front page to talk about this whole issue. And that caught the attention of the Institute for Justice and the Beacon Center of Tennessee, which are both nonprofit property rights and right to work, advocacy firms. And they reached out to me and they said, hey, we see what you're going through and we want to help. So I talked to both of them. Then I was like, hey, if you're good at what you do and you're good at what you do, and we all want to do the same thing, why don't we just all work together on this? So I ended up really luckily being able to create this this super legal team, which I like to refer to as the League of Justice. And so I had this great, so then it was a really different feeling. Then it was like, okay, I don't have to feel like I've done something wrong that I have to apologize for. No. I realize that you can stand up for your rights. I realize that you can you can take a stand when you know that you're in the right and you're just trying to live and survive and, make an honest living. So I worked with these guys. And do you want the long version or the short version from here
we
on?
can go. This is it, dude. Let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Right.
I think, because to me, this is really the scenario when I heard it, because I'd still not. We didn't move to Nashville yet, but I was watching this. It was like, this is absurd. It was just so insane, because it was like, of course people have studios in Nashville in their home.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
There's a reason why there's a word home studio.
It's like if you were in Idaho and they were like, I can't believe there's potatoes everywhere. It's like, it's Idaho. What do you expect?
Nice. Well played.
Oh, but yeah, continue. Let's go. Let's keep
on
going.
So the first thing we did was we saw that there was a little bit of a loophole where maybe I could rezone my property as something called a specific plan. And that's a special zoning exception where you apply for it and do all this stuff. So with those guys, I worked through that for a couple of years, where we had to go to the Metro Council, had to hire a local lawyer, probably. So I was very lucky. They helped fund this. So, but they spent there's a good bit of money spent trying to fight this thing. So probably like $20,000 or something like that was spent hiring a local land use attorney, going to the council and applying for this special zoning plan. And it was a SP. It was a specific plan. Yeah, specific plan, zoning plan. And then I had to go around the neighborhood. I had to take a petition and get all my neighbors, get like 40 of my neighbors to sign it, saying like, no, he's cool with us. We don't mind if he works in his home studio. It's okay with us if he changes it. And we went through that whole thing. And then the city council voted it down, and they said, no, we're denying it. We're not going to let you have this zoning change for your place, even though we've approved it for a bunch of other things in the past. And so then we were like, all right, cool. Now you've given us the go ahead, the green light that we need to go ahead and file a lawsuit. So in 2017, we filed a lawsuit. I did it with a co-plaintiff. So there's another woman named Pat Rayner, who's a retired hairdresser who was also shut down by the city. So it's, me. And also I looked like I was about 80 years old back then when I filed this thing, because I had like crazy long hair and a giant beard and everything like that. And so, here's this bearded old single dad and this retired hairdresser. And we filed a lawsuit against the city in 2017, saying that you can't shut us down. This is our constitutional right to be able to work from home and make an honest living from our home offices, from our home businesses. And that lawsuit has made it all the way to the Tennessee Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So we've appealed it multiple times, and right now it's actually on its way back down to the circuit court, because it's not quite done yet. Meanwhile, during that process, which involved like more press and podcast interviews and articles and TV appearances, like now I'm comfortable, if Channel 5 calls and say, we want to come down and talk to you soon, I'm like, okay, cool, I'll see you in 5 minutes. It's just like, once you do a bunch of them, you're like, all right, it'll be fine. But that stuff is a little bit scary at first, I'll be honest.
Well, yeah, it's people just being like, this thing that you do, and then people are like, oh, what does he do? He owns a studio. And it's just like, oh, okay. It's just, but that to me is just it. But then, you've got all this, and then COVID hits. And then you've got COVID, and everybody's working from home. Everybody's working from home.
So that brings us to 2020, that magical year that nobody will ever forget.
Nope.
And along came a new bill from a local council member. And it was this proposal to change the home business law and allow people to specifically have customers come to their house. And I saw that and I was like, holy shit, this is what we've been waiting for. I didn't mention it yet, but back in 2011, was actually the first time that anybody was aware of this limitation on home studios. and they had tried to pass a quote home studio bill, but it failed miserably in the Metro Council. And so when 2020 was here and this new bill came along, I looked at that and I was like, okay, I know from experience that you got to wait 10 years before they'll try something again. So this is the opportunity. I got to jump behind this bill and make this thing pass. So I decided to essentially make it my full-time job in 2020 to push this bill through the Metro Council. And first thing I did was start a petition. I was like, all right, I better go, start a petition and see if anybody actually wants this, And I went and started one online. And by the time July came around and we were in the final hearing for the bill getting passed, we had I think it was 166,000 signatures on the petition, which was really great because when I was at the council meetings at the public hearing and they're like, we want to hear from the constituents on whether or not people want this or not. I was like, you said you wanted to hear from your constituents. All right, here it is. We printed it out. Yeah, and it was like a huge ream of paper the size of a giant dictionary. And I was like clunk right down on the podium. And I was like, here it is. And along with that too, I was like, but it's a lot of comments from people. So I figured the best way to let you know what everybody wants is to distill it down for you. And the best way to do that is to turn it into a song. So I co-wrote a song with Tommy Womack, who's a brilliant songwriter here in Nashville, called goodness, we need to work from home. I almost forgot the title. I haven't said it in a minute. But so I played the song for the Metro Council at the public hearing. And believe it or not, in Music City, of all places, they said that was the first time anybody had ever played a song for a public hearing statement at the council. So I guess, maybe I should approach Guinness Book of World Records for that one.
that should be a one right there. That's up there. But to me, it shows how many people were for, like, it was just like also for this because they thought like, this isn't okay. Like it should be, because this whole thing is just it's just like absurd to me. Like when I still hear it and you're walking through this, I'm like, the fact that you had to make this and like be like, hey, here are all the people that want it. Do you not realize it? Because we're in Nashville. We're in a music city.
That's why people moved here.
Yes.
Like the way I see Nashville, I mean, I know there's a lot more to Nashville than just us, but we are a big deal. So let's be honest about it. I mean, we moved here because it's Music City, moved here to make music. So many people that I know in Nashville weren't necessarily from here. They grew up elsewhere and came here because of music. And then, like artists and musicians do in, since the beginning of time in cities, is like they move to an area, it becomes really cool because it's thriving with artists and music. And then it becomes trendy and then it gets gentrified. And then rich people move in and they build big rich buildings because that's where everybody wanted to move. And then it's like, we don't know about these artists and musicians in our backyard. They're playing music. I'm trying to have I don't know what I'm trying to do.
We're talking about our stocks right now. And we're trying very low.
We're talking about our stocks right now. And so, it's absurd to do that. So that's basically what's happened here in Nashville, East Nashville too, and it's like, it's really, really important to keep the music and the art thriving and to, stand up for our rights to be able to live here and do these things.
But I think what's also is, and I think this goes to you as a creative, as a producer, as an engineer, just this whole thing is that your willingness to figure out a way and be like, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure out something, whether it be a 5-year plan, whether it be like, you know what, I'm going to hop on a plane, going to Hong Kong, whether it be like, you know what, I'm going to go to college again, going to MTS. Regardless, it's these conscious decisions of like moving forward and figuring out a way. Yeah. And I think that's the important takeaway for a lot of people. They're like, should I keep on going? There's this pivotal point in so many scenarios where you choose either I'm going to keep on doing this thing or, I'll throw in the towel. I'll be quiet.
I had that so many times. So in a career in music and recording, there were so many points along my career path where I was like, I had to do an internal review. I was like, this is tough. I'm not making much money, or I'm not sure if I'm succeeding with this. should I consider doing something else? I mean, at one point, I wasn't necessarily thinking of switching careers, but I thought about moving to New York, and I went and looked at it because my brother was there. And when I looked at New York, after I was like, well, I could come to New York and it's pretty cool, but it's significantly more expensive here. And it seems like everybody's making the same amount of money recording music as I am back in Nashville. So I guess that's not a good idea. And then other times I was like, should I, think of some other career and go to school for something else? And then after I'd think about it, I'd come back to the same conclusion. I was like, no, I should just keep doing what I'm doing,
Well, it's even if you did another career, you'd probably be thinking about music. That's the thing too. And I think people get that, where it's like they're doing a thing they're not necessarily always crazy about, and they're always thinking about music. And it's like, well, maybe you should that. And so it's like, if that's the thing you ponder about and the thing you care about the most, do it.
But here's the thing about choosing another career, and this is for all your listeners. If you do choose another career and you're still thinking about music, for the first time, you're going to get to listen to more than one song over and over and over all day long.
It's true. Or you're just not going to listen to it. I think the thing for me, I know when I'm here, my fiance will be like, are you going to be melodiming things? Yeah. Can you throw on your phones, please? The headphones? Really? Because it's always that same
I'm like, have you heard this?
Repeat it again and again and again. She's like, I can you just put headphones on? I'm kind of tired of hearing that. Fair enough.
I get stuck when I'm melodiming. I get stuck in those moments where like I'm trying to get the work done, but then when you do the arrow key back and forth, and it just does like it does syllables of each word, and you're like, it's
the Bobby McFerrin setting on Melodime that you forget. And you're just like, what is that? It's just like it's all over the place.
Love
but
it,
dude, like to me, again, as I was like, man, was recording a linear journey? Was it very, very slow? No, it's just like these twisty, turny, all I don't know if that's a dictionary word, twisty, turny.
It is now, yeah.
It is, of just so many cool stories that I think people need to hear. Because I think, especially when people are like, I want to do this thing. Oh, it didn't happen perfectly the way I wanted. Oh, yeah, it's not supposed to. It's going to be messy. It's like songwriting. It's like producing for the first time. It's messy. It's all over the place. But it's an experience that you go like, oh, this is kind of, okay, let's just keep on going. And then from there, a process develops. And then also, too, just like in your petition, you find a lot of people that are there underneath, kind of like that support that's like, no, you got this. Keep on going. Keep on going.
A lot of people feel similarly. One of the things that I've learned about finding people who feel similarly is you have to begin by putting yourself out there and saying, this is how I feel. And that could just be your music. It's like you have to just make your music. You have to take a risk with it. And you have to be vulnerable on a certain level, and you have to put it out there, and then you have to let go of it and realize that the people I already know might not be the people who are drawn to this and we connect over this. But if I put whatever I'm doing, whether it's like saving a home studio or starting a podcast or writing songs, if I just put it out there, then somebody who does connect with it has a chance to find it. And then that's how that's how you connect with people and find your peeps.
Dude, I love this. We're gonna have to do another episode and get into gear. This was that.
We didn't even talk about songwriting. Let's do that.
Yeah, I know. It's just because, dude, like this. Sometimes I love those things, but the story behind how you get to where you are, I find so intriguing because everyone's is different, but they're all. It's just interesting. I went to a conference once and I saw one. He worked for this company called Team One, and he puts music to like big brands. And I was just like, oh, dude, that's insane. He works in studio, and I was like, how do you get there? And this was 2017. And he goes, what's your name? And I was like, Mike. He goes, Mike, I could tell you, it wouldn't make sense. And I was like, okay. I was like, that's not the answer I wanted to hear. I would prefer. And he was like, and then he just went into detail of cities that he hopped between, jobs that he had, how it led to this. And I was like, he goes, and what you'll notice is the things that you do, it's not going to be straight and narrow. It's going to be all over the place. And that's a good thing. It shouldn't be. He was like, it's totally not an interesting story if things work out perfectly in the beginning. And I was like, okay. I was like, I'll take that to heart. But dude, thanks for hanging out. And if they want to find you, if people are like, okay, I'm intrigued now, I want to know more about Lij, like, how can they find you?
Oh, great. Well, thank you for having me, Mike. This is a pleasure, man. And I totally dig your podcast too. Sorry, I got a dog barking out the window there. Hopefully you don't have to hear too much of it.
It's okay. It's all good.
But I love songwriting and I love making music, and I love the title of your show, that it's specifically songwriting for guitar too. Because that's for me, that's where it starts out. So but you guys can find me. Thanks everybody for listening. You can find me in a few different places. If you're curious about my podcast, which is the shirt I'm wearing right here, there it is, Recording Studio, it is, right there. Rockstars. That is my show. It's gosh, I think we're right at about 400 episodes now, and it's been going for 7 years and 2 million downloads. And that is interviews with producers and engineers and studio musicians. And it's all about making records in the studio, songwriters as well. So that's probably pretty entertaining for everybody. And that's at recordingstudiorockstars.com. And then if you're curious, you'd like to check out my studio, that is thetoyboxstudio.com. thetoyboxstudio.com. And that is the studio. It's a Grammy awarded recording studio. It's my home studio here in Nashville. And I recently, past few years from 2020, started revamping it. And so now looks like a spaceship inside, and it's been redesigned by Carl Tatz, and it has a Phantom Focus speaker system in there, which is lots of fun to listen to. So give me a shout if you ever want to come listen to it.
Oh, I love it, man. Thank you for hanging out with us. I really appreciate it. We'll have you back because there's more to dive into.
And let me add one other thing. So savehomestudios.com is a website I created, which I just kept a running list of news articles and press and all that kind of stuff around the home studio thing. Plus, I think you could still order a cool t-shirt there with the fist pumping in the air, holding the microphone. There you go.
I love it. We're going to have all the links in the description so you can check out. Well, man, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mike. Great to meet you, man.
And that does it for this week's episode. It was edited and produced by Chris Fafalius. I'm Mike Myers. Thanks for listening.